going down the trail, with what looked like bear prints with something dragging behind it. I grabbed my gun off the rack on the ATV and slung it over my shoulder. The trail looked fresh, but the prints and blood were starting to get covered in a layer of snowfall. While walking along the trail, I noticed something kind of weird in the middle of the bear tracks. It looked like a human foot almost, but rather elongated and thin, with only 4 toes on the end. The tracks twisted within the bear prints themselves, almost like the animal's foot spun a bit coming out of the bear track. I continued on while occasionally glancing into the track, and sure enough the prints were still there. When I go to the end in a large clearing, I stopped following the bear tracks. Something about being in this large clearing with an unknown animal was making me uneasy. I mapped it out and placed a red line over it, indicating a high predatory area. On the way back, I noticed something strange about my own boot prints. Now, I'm a pretty big guy, standing at 6 foot 2 inches with a size 13 boot, but whatever had made the tracks had a footprint significantly larger than my own. But that's not the worst part. Whatever it was, had followed my boot prints back, heading in the same direction I was. Whatever it was, it had snuck behind me and was heading towards my ATV. I shouldered my rifle and put a round in the chamber. I walked back, glancing down every so often to see if the twisted footprints were indeed still in mine. When I got back to my ATV, I noticed that the prints circled my vehicle and stopped behind it and shuffled a bit. I then noticed that my jerrycan was missing, and that thing had led a trail of gasoline down the road from where I came. I hopped on my quad to get going in the opposite direction, hoping to distance myself from whatever stole my fuel. After crossing over into Wyoming, I noticed that everything was rather still. It was still snowing, but the flakes almost seemed to be suspended in the air. Not falling, but not static either. I couldn't hear anything when my ATV was shut off, no animals, no snowfall, not even my own breathing. Almost like something has stopped all sound from existing. I found another game trail, this time a few hundred yards off the trail. I dismounted and walked towards the opening in the trees, with pristine snow covering the rocky terrain around me. All along the trail, I would catch fleeting glimpses of a shadow. Not shadows, no. Just one. Moving along the trail with me. I put it off to lack of sleep making me see things. On my way back, I got a chill up my spine. In my own boot prints were the same tracks I saw at the last trail. The same twisty human-like print, but this time, something was touching the ground in front of them. A swipe here and there, almost like whatever it was tracking me by my scent. I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. I reached for my sidearm, kicking myself for leaving the rifle on the ATV. I heard a ragged breath from my left. Like if you collapsed a lung on a deer. I drew and fired into the trees, striking an aspen and blowing a hole in its small frame. I saw nothing. No movement, no snowfall, no animal. I started getting the same feeling I was getting from the clearing, and ran back to my quad. Whatever had been following me, beat me there. I followed the track and stopped to see what it took next. It took my rifle. My rifle. A large rifle that would require something very large to carry it off in its mouth, or something with hands and the strength to carry it. I looked a little closer at the prints, and found something I had missed every time. Inside the footprints, right where the twist ended, I noticed 4 very long appendages picking through the twisted snow. It looked like a monkey foot, but longer and more hand-like, but not quite enough to be human. I mounted and hit the throttle, spinning out a bit until I got traction, and went shooting down the road. I was too low on fuel to go back to a main road where I could get help, and was forced to go to my next outpost. When I arrived, the small cabin/hut-like structure looked so comforting and protective I almost cried. It had fuel for the quad, a safe place for me to sleep, and a radio for help. The sun was setting, and I was firing up the stove after starting the generator when my radio crackled and came to life. I jumped when I heard the static hiss. I ran over to the radio and requested an evac or an extra team for a safe escort. When asked why, I lied and said I was being hunted by a bear and lost my rifle on the trail. The voice on the other end scoffed but obliged. My team would be there by morning. When I hung up the radio and started to get comfy and safe, I heard a loud thump hit my door. I froze in my bed, not knowing what to do. I finally got up after debating whether or not just hide. I'm no coward, I thought. I grabbed my sidearm and walked towards the door. I peeked out the small window to see if someone or something was out there. All I saw was darkness. Stupidly, I opened the door and shouted, "If you don't leave, I'm going to kill you. You took one of my guns, but I still have the other." No response. I looked at my door to see what hit it, and only saw the remnants of a snowball. A fucking snowball. I waited to see if I could see any movement, when another snowball came flying out of the darkness to my left and hit my shoulder. "You better run, or I'm going to fucking kill you," I yelled, as I slammed the door shut and ran out to confront whatever threw the snowball. I ran towards where the ball came from, watching for prints or signs of movement. I saw something in the darkness that looked like a man had fallen, and was scrambling on the ground to get up, making that raspy breathing noise. I stopped and aimed, but saw that whatever was in front of me had continued to run on all fours at an alarming speed. Faster than I could run. I froze when I saw the black silhouette dart off into the darkness, not sure what to do. After listening and hearing nothing, no breathing, no running, I headed back to my hut. Once I got to the clearing my hut was in, I stopped, relieved I had made it out of the woods alive. I took a deep breath and calmed myself down, and started walking towards my cabin, illuminated by the lone porch light on the deck. I looked down, trying to follow my tracks back to conserve energy, and nearly vomited. The twisted footprints were in my tracks, heading towards the cabin. I saw the trail heading back towards my cabin, each twisted footprint slamming down into my own until it got to my porch. Amidst all the snow dragged on by the thing, was my rifle and jerry can, placed neatly on the porch, leaning against the wall. The door was askew and jarred open a bit. I could have sworn I saw the leg of the thing dart in as soon as I looked at it. I wish I could say I bursted in there and shot the thing dead, but I was too frozen with fear to do anything but stand there. I wish I could say I was brave and fought the good fight, but I didn't. I crumbled onto the ground, cradling my knees until sunup. I had spent 6 hours in the darkness, waiting for whatever that thing was to come out and finish me. But it never happened. My crew found me covered in snow with my gun drawn and pointed at my cabin. They questioned me and searched the cabin. All of my food was eaten, my bed was torn up and made into a makeshift nest thing like a dog would sleep in, and the radio was destroyed, but no sign of whatever was hunting me. So my parents used to be big outdoor buffs. My father is an ex-champion hobby boat racer and my mom was an Alabama-raised country girl, so they always wanted to camp and go sailing and fishing and shit when I was little. They went on a trip with some friends of theirs when I was about 10, read as 16 years ago, and since then they refused to go camping anymore. Ever. My dad told me the story sometime after I had turned 18. It still makes me wonder, considering the following. My parents moved a lot and only had one set of friends they really kept in touch with all the times. Danny and Lisa. Danny and Lisa weren't outdoor nuts like my parents were, but they were friends and it's fun to camp with your friends, right? So they all planned like 5-day trip to a lake south of where we lived, with a creek that was on Danny's father's property, so they could camp on the property and fish all they wanted, then go to the lake with ease. They all left and everything from now on is from my father's account. He told me this once, and only once, and got drunk after he told me, which is extremely uncharacteristic of him anymore. The first 2 days were normal, just camping, drinking, sharing stories while fishing and boating and water skiing heaven. It was just young adults/parents having fun. The second night, all night everyone kept hearing weird yelps and barks, like two dogs were in a fight, but were both just hurt and yelping the whole time. They figured coyotes and slept. The next day they continued on their adventures. That night, they kept hearing those noises, but they were extremely close to the camp, so my father and Danny went out to go see if they could scare them off, while my mom and Lisa stayed behind scared out of their minds hiding in a tent, probably reading the Bible or something. Anyways, my dad and Danny went out to look for these fighting coyotes, searching by following the sound. They were hoping to scare the coyotes, or whatever they were, with a gunshot. They got to a clearing and could hear the noise extremely loud, but it seemed to be from multiple directions, as if the sounds were distant from each other. Now, my dad is a bit of a kook, swears he saw Bigfoot at 14, but this is different. He just told Danny to go back. No questions, no explanation, just Danny, we need to go back. So they did, but the sounds didn't fade away this time. Danny nervously asked my dad what was going on, but my dad wouldn't tell him, he just kept shushing him. Danny is a bit of a goofball, hence why I always liked my Uncle Danny, so he thought my dad was getting him back for a prank. He kept nudging my dad and trying to get him to say gotcha. But my dad never untensed. Finally they got close to the creek, a ways up from the camp, and my dad told Danny to run. Fast. Sprint. Then my dad took off, no remorse. Danny apparently followed, but tripped and called for my dad, but my dad, who tears up and sputters a bit at this part, also uncharacteristic of him, refused to go back for him, even though Danny started calling for help. Danny was yelling that his leg was broken, it hurt, etc., but my dad just kept running. Then, my dad, my mom, and Lisa all say they heard what sounded like a really fucking loud cougar growl. Imagine two lionesses going at it, amplified by 70 Marshall full stacks. That's how loud they said it was. It made my dad's ears ring. After that, Danny stopped screaming for help. My dad got back to camp and the ladies asked what the fuck was going on, but my dad just said something was out there. My mom, being the practical woman she is, says, well, no shit, what was it? My dad wouldn't answer. Lisa is freaking out asking where Danny is, but my dad just keeps saying he'll be here in a second. A few hours pass by, and the ladies are extremely worried about Danny, while my dad apparently would cringe when they said something. Finally, from the opposite side my dad arrived from, came Danny, walking just fine up to the camp, wordlessly. My dad cocked his rifle, but waved it away as survival readiness, something my mom says she won't forget, because that's what tipped her off that something was wrong. Danny first walked up and nudges his way next to my mother, but after the weird looks and the death glare from my father, moved closer to Lisa, who had been nagging him for about 10 minutes, but he would either grunt yes or no, or would just stare into the fire. My dad finally asked Danny what happened to his leg, and Danny looked up confused almost. My dad told him, I thought you said it was broken. Danny looked at him and replied, broken. Then, as if on cue, started yelling, Steve, on my leg, I think it's broken. I nope writing that part. I can just imagine it all too fucking well. The ladies grabbed medkits and first aid and water and were rationalizing it as him going into shock, but upon getting